r/AskReddit. Medical professionals of Reddit. When did you have to tell a patient I've seen it all before to comfort them, but really you had never seen something so bad, or of that nature? In dental school, I had an emergency patient come in, complaining of sore gums. Upon examination, I found a massive calculus bridge. Google it for pictures behind her lower front teeth. She only had about 3 remaining lower teeth, but they were all connected with a whitish brown mineral deposit that was about the size of a golf ball. She had never had her teeth cleaned and she was probably 55 or so. I basically performed an emergency cleaning. She could speak so much better afterwards. Of course I had to play it off like it was normal, but in my years of practice I still haven't seen a case that bad again. Get your teeth cleaned, people. Even if you can't afford every 6 months, once a year, or every other year is a hell of a lot better than never. I showed up to a house for a possible overdose. 3 firefighters and a police officer were on top of a man who was prone and naked from the waist down. They immediately told my partner and I to restrain the patient to the gurney because the patient was combative. It turns out he took something thinking it was weed but turned out to be laced with something else, possibly PCP. During his trip he attempted to cut his penis off, but wasn't successful. As fate would have it, I knew the patient personally and tried to comfort him on the way to the hospital. During the ride he became somewhat cognizant and was ashamed of himself. I tried to comfort him as I held his penis in place. I would be lying if I said I had seen a severed penis before. I worked as a mental health tech to get through undergrad. 15F in the adolescent ward claims to have swallowed a staple. Hey, but whatever. As I'm taking her down to X-ray I tell her about the dime I swallowed when I was a kid. It happens. Well, turns out she underestimated the number of staples by around 100. Every printout given by the therapists had been a swallowed staple. She had gotten staples from the other kids. The X-ray of her abdomen looked as if it were a weird staple Y snow globe. And yet, somehow, she was back to trying to steal psych ward staples a week later. Never did figure out how they removed them all. Not medical professionals, but we were the patients. My daughter, who was 3 at the time, had to have a cavity filled. As we were leaving, the dentist told me just to watch my daughter because sometimes kids chew their gums because it's numb and feels weird. So the drive home took 30 minutes and I had been talking to my daughter the entire time to keep her busy. I park my car in my driveway, opened the passenger seat to get my daughter out, and her entire lower lip on the left side is gone. She had chewed it off down to her chin. She ended up in emergency surgery, but the surgeon kept telling us it would be fine and he sees this stuff all the time. She ended up having multiple surgeries, and when she was finally healed, the surgeon told us that it was the worst injury like that he had ever seen. He wasn't sure how she would heal, but you can hardly tell it happened now. Not a medical professional, but a story about my father. After years of a blood disease, his spleen had to be removed as it had swollen to a size that made breathing difficult. Apparently the surgeon had a photo taken, post-extraction, where he is cradling my dad's 22.0 lb spleen. To top it off, one day into recovery, when doing one of those gentle push on the abdomen type exams on him, my dad's sutures catastrophically failed and he let loose a spray that coated the doctor, his nurse, and a good portion of the ceiling. Luckily for Dad, the hospital staff was on point that day and kept him alive despite his body's best effort. I heard all of this from the doctor while he was removing the line of staples that went from crotch to sternum. Some weeks later, Dad didn't like to share, apparently. Worked in a heart procedure lab that helped try to get rid of bad heart rhythms. A prisoner came in for a last-ditch effort to help his failing heart and had developed a condition called ventricular tachycardia. Setting the patient up and looking at his rhythm heart, it looked pretty bad. Before we got started he grabbed me on the arm and said, "I'm scared. Is it going to be okay? We have very talented physicians here, sir, and they do this all the time." The ventricular tachycardia was set off during the procedure and deteriorated into ventricular fibrillation. We were able to resuscitate him, but he never woke back up. Comfort your patients, folks. Years ago, 2000. I was playing soccer and noticed a little skin irritation underneath my arm. I thought it would go away, but it developed into a weird thing. It was about 2 in diameter and grew to be a collection of essentially looked like hundreds of skin tags grew together in a little circle. I went to the doctor, who didn't have a clue, and he sent me to a specialist. While there, it seemed like he didn't know either. This was further evidenced when 4 other doctors came in to take a look and were really interested. They took a ton of photos and told me they hadn't seen this before and couldn't really offer any medication, and said they would monitor it. About a week later, the skin tags developed little circles on the top that turned into scabs within a couple days. Then, the thing just kinda dried up and fell off me. It was f***ing weird, and to this day I have no idea what it was. I was not comforted. I had to have my leg rebuilt after a car accident and was eventually sent to Duke University for my surgery. My surgeon was supposed to be like the best orthopedic surgeon in the country. I think he used to work for the Baltimore Ravens. Anyway, all the doctors from my hospital at home were very unsure if I would even have a functioning leg, let alone walk normal again. The first appointment at Duke, that dude told me it was really not a big deal and he would have me fixed almost good as new. I honestly thought he was just trying to be nice and optimistic, but he was very serious. 5 months later, I was walking and learning how to run again. He said I was one of the most complicated surgeries he has had to do, and a group of surgeons flew in to observe him do it. My aunt started her nursing career in a county hospital, which means you get all the homeless folks. A guy came in with the whole of the back of his leg and butt utterly and very deeply infested with maggots. He just hadn't gotten around to coming in earlier, he said. The depressing thing is that while it was a first for my aunt, it was by no means the last. Apparently it's more common than you'd think. In 2011, I had a saddle pulmonary embolism 2 weeks before my scheduled wedding. My quite seasoned heart surgeon seemed pretty confident that I'd be okay, and he even said he'd get me to my wedding on time. Long story short, I was in the hospital for about a month due to complications. Several weeks later, when I was visiting my heart surgeon for a follow-up, he told me he'd only ever seen 2 other people as sick as I was. Those 2 didn't survive. I'm an oncology nurse. The other day I had a patient who had a nosebleed that just would not stop. I gave him an extra infusion of platelets, vitamin K, and multiple doses of Afrin nasal spray which vasoconstricts. It would stop for maybe 20 minutes before it would start bleeding like a facet again through the family's pinching fingers. The whole time I was, nosebleeds are common. It is the dry air from the heater act. I ended up personally holding his nose for over an hour while straight we waited from someone from ears, nose, throat to show up to pack it. He lost so much blood he need a blood transfusion. My arm was so sore and the patient looked like he had been murdered twice over from all the blood on his clothes. Not a medical professional, but my mom is an RN, and boy has she had some stories over the years. Yet, one in particular stands out. She had a male patient come in with an extremely swollen like the size of a Pringle can swollen. She said it was the biggest she ever encountered in her decades as a nurse. He claimed he broke it during sex. She had to put a catheter in. The guy was freaking out and she had to reassure him that this was a walk in the park for her, but she was seriously questioning how to get the catheter in. She called in her coworker to help steady his also so someone else could just witness what she was seeing, while she gave him every painkiller she was legally able to give, and stuck the catheter in. Got it in the first try. Thankfully. She still doesn't know how she managed to get it in, but was thankful she did, lol. Eventually it came out that he hadn't broken his during sex, but actually after cleaning his fish tank without washing his hands and got an infection from it. Neutral face. I am a surgical tech. I got called in on a Saturday for a lady who had an infection from a component separation. Basically they put a giant piece of mesh in you for hernias. I wasn't prepared. When we lifted up her gown, the smell wafted and I have never almost puked before until that moment. About 20 centimeters circle around her umbilicus was black and necrotic. It was absolutely awful. We basically removed the entirety of the necrotic tissue all the way down to the peritoneum. Just gray and black slimy mass of fat and skin. The worst part is that I had to measure the necrotic tissue and it requires me to lean in a little close to it. The surgeon was laughing because I was green when I got back to the surgical field. Then during that surgery another person who had the same procedure had come to the ER with an infection. And then a third. We stopped using the mesh because that's what was getting infected. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and subscribe. Please check out more of our videos or our playlist. It is perfect for when you want background noise or to put on when you are falling asleep. Once again, thank you and have a great day.